Now, let's talk about something most viewers missed. Not a strike, not a headline, not a dramatic clip. A quieter change. A change that defense analysts tend to care about more than explosions because it can reshape outcomes without ever firing a weapon. In the Red Sea, where shipping lanes compress into narrow corridors and reaction time gets brutally short, the story isn't only about missiles or drones. It's about the electromagnetic spectrum. And analysts are paying attention because there are growing signs the fight is shifting from hard kill to something else. Soft kill. Confusing sensors, breaking links, degrading targeting, forcing mistakes. Not with Hollywood-style total blackout, but with a layered, modern form of electronic pressure that changes the math of naval defense. And the reason this matters is simple. If you can disrupt targeting even slightly, you can force the other side to waste weapons, reveal methods, or miss opportunities. That's not drama, that's doctrine. The map logic. Why the Red Sea is a different type of fight. Look at the Red Sea and the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. It's a narrow maritime choke point, one of those places where geography doesn't just shape strategy, it is strategy. Because narrow sea space means three things. First, commercial shipping becomes predictable. Traffic funnels through routes that are easy to observe, easier to pressure, and hard to fully protect. Second, defense becomes exhausting. A warship defending traffic isn't just patrolling, it's running a high-tempo air defense posture, often for long stretches because threats can appear fast, in volume, and with little warning. Third, it's the perfect environment for grey zone pressure. Not necessarily the kind of action that clearly triggers a major escalation, but the kind that forces constant readiness, constant expenditure, constant decision-making. And we know this posture is real because open reporting describes how the US Navy and partners have faced sustained engagements and a tempo of intercepts described as without modern precedent for the Navy in recent decades, with warships adapting tactics, radar tuning, and weapons setup under constant pressure. Source. Now here's where analysts start leaning forward. Sustained defense in a tight corridor pushes navies to innovate. And the fastest innovation often happens in the invisible layer, the spectrum layer. The part most people don't think about. Layered defense isn't only missiles. Public discussion usually gets stuck on one argument. Why shoot expensive missiles at cheaper drones? That debate is real, and it shows up in open reporting, analysts discussing the cost exchange problem, the limits of missile inventories, and the pressure created by sustained engagements. Source. But doctrine doesn't say use only the cheapest tool. Doctrine says protect the ship, protect the mission, maintain decision space. So modern layered defense isn't just long-range intercept, medium-range intercept, point defense gun. It's also detection, identification, tracking, engagement, authorization, kill chain continuity. And that kill chain can be attacked without hitting the ship. That's where electronic warfare becomes a strategic lever. Because EW can target the chain in multiple places. You can complicate detection, you can degrade tracking, you can interfere with guidance, you can disrupt command links, you can spoof perception. Even a small disruption can force the defender into a dilemma: shoot earlier, shoot more, or hold longer and accept risk. And in a narrow sea, dilemmas arrive fast. The silent shift. Why analysts think EW is becoming the volume answer. Here's the key point. The Red Sea problem is not only a threat exists, its threats can arrive in volume. And volume is where hard kill systems get stressed. Finite missiles, finite cells, finite reload options, finite crew endurance. That doesn't mean navies abandon missiles. It means they look for capacity. And one of the most important concepts in modern defense technology is this. Electronic warfare can create defensive capacity without consuming interceptors. Not because it guarantees a stop, but because it can reduce the number of threats that become clean shots. This is why senior surface warfare leaders have publicly highlighted a need for more off-board electronic attack and longer endurance decoying and EW effects. explicitly pointing to the value of systems like Nolka and the desire for longer legs to counter saturation. That is a huge signal. Because when an institution publicly says we need more off-board EA, they're telling you something about what's being learned operationally. Not everything should be solved by firing another missile. Some problems need spectrum solutions, especially under saturation pressure. What off-board really means and why it's a big deal. Let's translate. If EW is only on board a ship, the ship is the center of the effect. But if EW can be pushed off-board through decoys, drones, distributed emitters, then the battle space gets complicated for the attacker. Now the attacker isn't just targeting a ship, they're targeting a changing electromagnetic environment. And that environment can create false targets, ghost fleets, confusing signatures, delayed recognition, wasted shots. And importantly, it can do this repeatedly. That's why the discussion of longer endurance electronic decoys matters in open reporting. It suggests an emphasis on persistence, staying in the air long enough to complicate multiple threat windows, not just one. Now, I'm not claiming this happened in this exact engagement at this exact time. What I am saying is public commentary from credible defense reporting indicates a doctrinal direction toward more persistent off-board electronic attack to handle saturation dynamics. That's the shift analysts are tracking. Gray zone logic. Why this can stay below the line and still reshape behavior. Here's where the analysis becomes uncomfortable in a good way. Because gray zone operations aren't only about ships being attacked. They're about testing thresholds. They're about probing response cycles. They're about shaping perception and cost. And there's a framework many strategists use. If you can force the defender to spend more money, more time, more attention, more political capital, without triggering a clear escalation event, then you've achieved pressure. That's not a moral statement. It's a strategic reality. This is why transparency, documentation, and presence operations become counter-tools in gray zone environments. Frameworks often discussed in strategic literature on maritime gray zone competition. Gray zone success often comes from operating below the threshold, forcing dilemmas and managing escalation optics. The three interpretations. Now, here's where analysts split because the same observable environment can mean different things. Interpretation 1. This is a saturation problem, meaning attackers are trying to overwhelm defenses through volume and mixed threats, forcing expensive intercepts and fatigue. This aligns with open reporting, emphasizing the unprecedented tempo of intercepts and the tactical learning process underway. Interpretation 2. This is a spectrum problem, meaning the real contest is about sensors, signatures, guidance, and decision cycles. Who sees first? Who understands first? Who forces the other into errors? This aligns with public discussion around expanding off-board electronic attack and counter-saturation EW effects. Interpretation 3. This is a doctrine evolution problem, meaning operational experience is forcing a change in how surface fleets think about defensive fires, cost exchange, and the balance between hard kill and soft kill layers. This aligns with open reporting that the Navy is learning rapidly, adjusting tactics, and debating better mixes of systems for this kind of sustained engagement. All three can be true at the same time, and that's exactly why interpretation matters.
What this suggests about U.S. naval strategy. So what does this mean for U.S. naval strategy in this corridor? Not the U.S. will do X next. Not this proves Y. But a doctrinally safe assessment. If the threat environment continues to reward volume and mixed salvos, then navies will logically prioritize more layered defenses with cheaper per-shot options where acceptable. More non-kinetic tools that can reduce demand on missiles. More off-board effects that increase defensive capacity. More rapid learning loops, tactics updates, radar tuning, engagement profiles. This is consistent with open discussion of ongoing adaptation, tactical analysis, and the need to optimize defensive posture under sustained pressure.
And it's consistent with public signals that the surface force is thinking hard about how to handle high-volume threats where EW, decoys, and off-board effects become more than nice to have. The miscalculation risk debate. Fuel legally safe. Now, the most dangerous part of any gray zone environment is not always escalation by intent. It's escalation by misread. Miscalculation can happen if one side believes the other won't respond. One side assumes the defense posture is weaker than it is. One side overestimates the political tolerance for sustained risk. Or one side misunderstands a doctrinal red line. Drop your answer like this so threads form naturally.